Where'd all my fragrances go?
Here's some codes to save you some cash on your next Middle Eastern niche or designer fragrances.
What's going on, guys? My name is Neeb. Welcome back to AROMATIX. I'm packing. I'm moving. All of my fragrances are in boxes, but today we're gonna be talking about a really good Middle Eastern niche fragrance. Today's fragrance comes from the house of Gissah Perfumes. Like with many other Middle Eastern niche fragrances, and like with Gissah Saba, this is pretty beastly stuff. I know it can be hard and scary for a lot of people to jump into some of these brands because of the stigma, you know, animalic, oud fragrances. However, that's not the case. And really 80%, maybe even a little bit more of Middle Eastern perfume, modern day Middle Eastern perfumes, don't really have animalic accords anymore. Sure, they could be a little bit more spicy or a little bit ambery, but really everything they do packs much more of a punch than something like here in the West. Now, granted, I do have a taste for oud fragrances. Whenever I review something, I try to keep it as unbiased as possible, and I give you just descriptive, factual explanations as to how the fragrance smells itself. I was raised here in the West, and so my taste for fragrances is like a lot of you guys. I like sweet, I like ambery, I like spicy, I like fresh, and I do enjoy some of blues, as well as enjoying a lot of oud fragrances. The good thing is, though, is whenever I talk about oud fragrances, you're gonna know. I'm gonna make it very clear that this has oud, and a lot of oud fragrances doesn't necessarily mean animalic. Tom Ford's Oud Wood, it's not that animalic. I think I just really like animalic oud. But if I do come across a fragrance that has that kind of oud, I'm definitely gonna let you guys know, and I'll make sure you know exactly what it smells like. And if it smells like butthole, then that's exactly what I'll say. And by doing so, hopefully I can make this a little bit easier for you guys to jump into some of these blind buys, because I know that half of these, if not 90% of these, you can't really sample. And really to only experience a lot of these banging ass fragrances, you really kind of just have to jump into a blind buy. A lot of them are worth every penny, and hell, some of them are cheaper than designers. They're like no brainer. So don't miss out. Really pay attention to some of the descriptors that I use for a lot of these fragrances. And if you enjoy what I described, then you're probably and likely to enjoy a lot of these fragrances as well. So let's go ahead and get started with today's fragrance. And today we're gonna be talking about the second part to a two-part collab with Gissah and Abdulmajeed Abdallah. What the hell did he just say? This is a famous singer in the East, and they collabed and made their second fragrance. The first one was called Awal Hikayatna, which means first encounter, and it was a really good fragrance, actually. Doesn't really smell like this one, though. This one's quite different, and we'll talk about scent profile in a second. This is what the box looks like. It's magnetized, nothing really crazy to run home to. On the back, some description and all of that good stuff. This one's called Aish Saeed, and that essentially means living happy. And both of these, Awal Hikayatna and Aish Saeed, are names of songs, basically. The bottle itself looks like so. It's a nice rubberized finish, a little bit unusual, but very unique, actually. Very, very unique. The cap is a nice metal, pretty hefty. It's got some weight to it. It's on there pretty snug, but it doesn't snap into place. Atomizer is extremely high quality stuff. Pressurized, you can really pick how much of the juice you want to atomize. But the top notes of this fragrance include, I can taste it. One sec. Top notes of the fragrance include bergamot, raspberry, osmanthus, and then in the heart we've got jasmine, orris, and orange flower, and in the base we've got vanilla, patchouli, and sandalwood. The gym. Yeah, I wore it to the gym. It's relatively versatile, to be honest, but it's very unique. If you're into Western fragrances, 100%, let's just stick to 90%. 90% of these fragrances, Middle Eastern luxury fragrances, are gonna be exactly that, unique. If you want compliments and you wanna stand out, this is gonna be another part of that 90%. So this fragrance got me a lot of attention. I got 3 compliments, actually 4. One from the Chipotle guy, but they were all guys, for sure. Then again, today there weren't many chicks at the gym anyway, so nevertheless, it gets attention, for sure. I have zero doubt in my mind that the girls that I know would compliment me on this fragrance, as well as with the original, by the way. The original got me unsolicited compliments like crazy, and from women as well. This one, I feel like is gonna be no different. Actually, the compliment factor on this one is a little bit higher, and we'll talk about it. It's because of the opening. So the opening, this fragrance is extremely, genuinely, you guys, it's just addicting stuff, the opening. It got to the point where I was at the gym, I had this in my bag, and I sprayed it again after 2 hours, because that's how long the opening of this fragrance lasts. So with the opening of this fragrance, you get the raspberry, the osmanthus, and the bergamot. Bergamot just adds some freshness to it, nothing unique. However, the unique nature of this fragrance is gonna be in the use of the osmanthus. It's got this super juicy raspberry and osmanthus. And what the osmanthus contributes is a couple of different accords. I get apricot, I get a leather nuance, a musky nuance, and an earthy nuance. And that's really where this fragrance shines. Osmanthus in general, for me, can be a hit or a miss. For this one, it's a hit. It really depends on how earthy that note goes, in my opinion. Sometimes if they overdo it, it can come off a little bit pungent, but in this case, it's beautiful. There is a base note of vanilla in this fragrance, but I can sense it all the way from the top to the mid to the dry down. And that's kind of what this fragrance does. It kind of just transitions and shifts. Sometimes you have fragrances that really transform throughout the wear, and then sometimes you have more complex fragrance. In my experience, the more complex fragrance, they don't necessarily transform, but rather they do this thing where it's kind of calculated and they put notes that really mingle well together and just kind of pass off the pole from one transition to another. And that's essentially what this one does, like many other Middle Eastern luxury fragrances do. They kind of do the whole transitions or the passing of the pole transitions. Excellent fragrance. What dominates the top of this fragrance is going to be this juicy raspberry and a fuzzy, yes, a fuzzy musky-like apricot, borderline creamy as well. The vanilla is dosed up pretty high in this fragrance, so it's relatively sweet all the way from the top to the dry down. There's going to be this undertone of an earthy vibe that you get with the osmanthus and a slight bit of leather. However, with many other houses like Gissah Perfumes and Amouage, for example, there's usually, or I find a lot of these fragrances that use, or brands rather, that use a fixative, or their powerhouses, they generally use more fixatives, and that's how they get the powerhouse, right? And so if they have a proprietary blend of fixatives, it's gonna be like this distinctive funk across the entire brand's fragrances. And that's the case with this one. And what I get, the main nuances I get with Gissah Perfumes funk is going to be like this musky leather accord, and it's found in here as well. It's not excessive, but it's definitely there, along with many other of their fragrances as well. So you get this musky leather as a backdrop, but mostly this super juicy raspberry and fuzzy apricot with an undertone of green nuances, and of course this hefty dose of vanilla. As this one starts to transition, which really takes a while, it's like 2 hours before you get into the mid, you start to sense a little bit more of like this white floral nuance. It kind of just softens everything out as if it wasn't already soft, to be honest with you guys. But at the same time of its softness, it has this super bright, juicy raspberry apricot, super mouth-watering opening with this one. Now that we're in the mid at about hour 2 or hour 3, you're gonna start to notice that the earthy nuances start to shine a little bit more. And I blame it mostly on this orris. It starts to develop this thick and rooty quality, almost literally smells like floral roots. And that's generally the description or the nuance that comes from orris. This one is going to be in that earthy, rooty nuance or realm of things. The orange flower and the jasmine just play these supportive roles. I feel like the white floral contribution is definitely there from both aspects. However, the jasmine enhances some of that sweetness with this natural nectar type of, or honey type sweetness, along with the orange flower really just softening things out with the white floral nuance, along with this orange undertone as well. So keeping some of those citruses alive, keeping it relatively fresh and easier to wear, really. And I really don't start to detect that, solid dry down until about hour 5. And in the dry down, it starts to turn into this more ambery, warmer, and just like this dense base of the sandalwood and patchouli. The patchouli in this is not really anything that's too earthy, honestly. And I think because of this, the way that this one is well-rounded, we've got this creamy sandalwood, creamy vanilla, rooty orris, it kind of takes away any of those rough edges that are noticeable with any type of patchouli nuance. You get like this rough, earthy vibe with patchouli. With this one, it's not like that whatsoever. There's nothing rough about this fragrance. It's definitely a fragrance that pops off and projects extremely well, but you don't necessarily have to be rough or spicy to do that as well. You could have the right fixatives, and that's exactly what this one has to do exactly that with. So a relatively juicy, fruity, earthy, and vanillic fragrance. Beautiful fragrance, honestly. Attention grabbing for sure. Very unique smelling. You're not gonna smell like anybody else, man. Juicy fruits, earthy undertone, vanilla, and basically some ambers is the most that I get with this fragrance. A bunch of different accords just by the uses of a couple of notes, really. And they just use it in the right amount or in the right doses. Very calculated. They calculated the top to the mid to the dry down for sure. This one was one that wasn't composed and just thrown together. This is one that they sat with and they worked on for sure. You can sense all of the transitions and the quality of this fragrance. The quality of this is a 10 out of 10. So it is, in my opinion, worth the money, and not only that, it's a piece of history as well. This is definitely going to be and is a collector's item, considering how limited it is and the fact that a Middle Eastern singer, a very famous one, made it. So projection, performance of this fragrance, a 10 out of 10. On clothing, this will last easily 12 hours. I wanted to say to the next day, but it really doesn't have like some of those dense woods and spices and ambers that would really carry it on, in my opinion, to the next day. But I would not be surprised if you could still smell this on clothing to the next day. And what I think you'll get most of is going to be the earthy nuances, because that's usually the types of nuances or notes that'll carry on into a longer performing fragrance. This is still a beast mode performing fragrance. I personally wouldn't spray this more than about 6 to 8 times max. Generally for beast mode performing fragrances, I'll do like 6 to 7 sprays, but with this one, I really wanted to I couldn't get enough. I genuinely could not get enough. Compliment factor for this is a 10. The first day that I wore this, I got 4. I swear on everything I love, including this fragrance, 4 compliments. The one guy was like, man, you always smell good, but today, whatever you're wearing, that smells fire. Took it out and I sprayed him on the chest. He's like, no, and I sprayed him anyway, but he loves it. As far as the occasions goes with this fragrance, extremely versatile. Extremely versatile. So you really get what you pay for with this one. You can dress it up, you can dress it down, you can wear this in literally every single season. It does smell like a more spring and summertime fragrance, but it has everything it needs to work in the fall and winter. It's got the vanilla, it's got the fruits, it's got this transparent quality while still remaining this extremely crazy performance. It's all the fixative. If beast mode is what you're into, you need to get into these Middle Eastern luxury fragrances, and this is no different or any less than exactly that. Beast mode. Jammy fruits, vanilla, and earthy undertones is exactly what Aish Saeed by Abdulmajeed Abdallah and Gissah Perfumes is all about. This fragrance is a 10 out of 10 for me. That's what I think about this fragrance. No oud, nothing animalic. The only unusual thing that's going to be like a sucker punch is going to be the performance. If you're in the West and you don't have any experience with Middle Eastern fragrances, luxury fragrances, specifically luxury fragrances, then this will definitely uppercut you in every good way. If you enjoyed any one of my descriptors, consider picking this bad boy up. Let me know down in the comments your experience, if you have any with Gissah Perfumes. And if you do, let me know which one you have in your collection. While you're down there, make sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and until the next video, peace. There you have it. No oud, nothing animalic. That's it. Earthy juicy, fruity, earthy, and vanillic.